We are good.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the History of Violence shorts. Check us out on Apple and Spotify for the longer podcast versions. What's up, Joseph?
Not a lot. How about you?
Not a lot, just enjoying some, well, sort of enjoying some Jeff Speakman action, I guess. This movie wasn't quite up to the level that The Perfect Weapon was, unfortunately. So
I was pretty excited going into it, but there was sorely lacking a decent amount of Speakman and William Lustig, if I'm being.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, we're talking about 1995's The Expert. It's directed by Rick Avery and William Lustig, who I guess wasn't really um, credited in this as a director, but kind of I don't know if he stepped in, like was like, okay, I gotta shore this thing up or something, or what happened exactly, but
Yeah, I'm not sure.
not credited.
He's not credited, and I guess Larry Cohen also did some uncredited work on the script, which I would imagine maybe that's how Lustig got involved or Cohen got involved because they worked together on
Yeah,
Maniac Cop and all that.
if maybe he called him up and was like, hey, we gotta like fix this.
Right? I don't think
Right.
there's any amount of really fixing it overall, even though there are some
Yeah.
that I really dig. But yeah,
There's some cool scenes in this movie, but it doesn't add up to very much, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate because Jeff Speakman, if you go listen to our episode on The Perfect Weapon on the podcast feed, Jeff Speakman is a great martial artist and a great martial arts actor, and he like came out of the gate being a better actor than Van Damme or Steven Seagal, and just never kind of caught on or got the roles that he could have gotten to take him to the next level. And so then he was kind of reduced to stuff like this, unfortunately, that, I mean, he does what he can with it, but it's
yeah,
not really going anywhere.
it really isn't. So, but it was an interesting watch. It's on Tubi for free, so I can give a quick rundown of the VHS box so people have an idea what to expect if they feel inclined to check out Speakman, which I think you should once we get into the cast. So, but here's the back.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's cornered a killer with multiple personalities. Now they're all going to die. When special operations expert John Lomax, Jeff Speakman from The Perfect Weapon and Street Night, discovers that his sister has been murdered, he jumps into action and helps the police nail the creep. But when a psychiatrist claims that the killer has multiple personalities and successfully argues that he should be transferred from a prison to be rehabilitated in a hospital, Lomax decides to take justice into his own hands. In the meantime, the killer puts his many minds to work, taking care of the tough warden, James Brolin, preparing for the final confrontation. But the best plans in hell won't prepare him to face the expert.
I love these boxes because they promise so much that doesn't fucking happen in any of these movies.
They really do. And that's overselling uh, James Brolin. Even though I do love him in this movie, it oversells his part by a little bit.
I think one of the reasons I love some of these movies so much is because when you read a video box like that for one of these movies and it like promises all this shit that really, like I said, doesn't happen in this movie. I mean, it
Right?
does, but not to the extent that they say it does. But every once in a while, then you run across one that it really does, and it makes up for all the ones that don't. And
It does.
this is in the case that doesn't make up for it. But for every one of these, there's a you know we talked about Kickboxer 4 in a previous video, and that's kind of the case with that. But I love that in a different way. So I'm trying to think of a movie that's like an example of that really exemplifies what we're talking about. Because some of these just like I can't even think of a good word for it, but I guess like I said, they overpromise and underdeliver almost every time. So it's
Yeah.
nice when you find the ones that do, but unfortunately not this in this case.
That said, if it's 1995 and I'm in the action aisle and I see Jeff Speakman on the front and I flip it over and read that, it's definitely going home with me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Especially the cast because that may be the coolest part of this movie. So The fact that it
It's
has,
kind of a ridiculous cast.
it really is. I mean, Jeff Speakman's enough to make me watch it, but then it has James Brolin as the warden. You've got Ted Raimi in a really, really, really small part.
Was the thing with Ted Raimi like in the '90s that just if you said, "Hey, there's a little role for you," he would just show up?
Yeah, I've got one day of work for you. And I'm
Right.
sure that
I mean,
Ted Raimi is probably the Lustig deal because he's used Ted in other things. So
yeah, true.
I'm sure that that's probably where Ted came from. And then my absolute favorite is the fact that Ernest himself, Jim Varney, shows up in this flick as a badass, and I laughed so hard because I loved it. I mean,
Yeah, and he
I
came off like badass too. Like he actually
yeah,
seemed pretty cool in this movie, and you're used to him being fucking earnest.
I mean, minus the
And
like racism and misogyny about his woman that he lives with, but that's just part of the character.
right, yeah, and we got some favorites of mine too. We've got in Red West, we got to mention from Roadhouse fame,
That's true. Yep.
member of the of Elvis's Memphis Mafia way back when.
Yep.
Um, uh, Elizabeth Grayson, of course, of Highlander the series fame. If any Highlander fans are out there.
True.
And also Wolfgang Bodison, who is also a Highlander the series alum. He played a bad guy in an episode, and I gotta say, and not that this movie is great, so it's not like he's like really getting to do a lot. That's like, oh, I'm a great actor, but Wolfgang Bodison came off pretty cool in this.
He did. It's a pretty solid cast for how terrible the script is. I mean, this is
Yeah,
half baked at best, and it
there's
definitely
so much.
feels like they tried to salvage it and it just didn't. It didn't happen.
Yeah, I feel like Larry Cohen came in like at the last minute. It was like, okay, well, fix this scene, fix this, we'll fix this. But there was just enough that they couldn't really quite, like you said, salvage everything and get it on track to be a good movie necessarily.
Right? I mean, I'm not saying that Q the Serpent is a masterpiece compared to this, but it's on the low side of Larry Cohen for sure.
And I gotta mention too the actor that plays the bad guy. The actor's name is Michael Shanner. He plays Martin Kagan. He's really good in this. He's really
Yeah,
smarmy and like really like glib. And I really wish I don't think like his Wikipedia page doesn't have anything like I don't know that he did anything before or after this.
I've
Um,
seen him in anything else.
but and the script doesn't really do him any favors, but he really kind of pulls it off.
He does. I thought, especially as he's got that like repeating line at the beginning when he kills Speakman's sister, where he's like, "Life is good, love is better, and I love you," and you're like, "Whoa."
He get like he's it's cool because he that scene between him and the sister. So the basic plot is yeah, like we read from the box, like Speakman's sister, like where does she work at? Like a college library, something like that.
Something like that, or she's a full time student, or it's something to do with a library or a university. It's not super clear, and she's only in the movie for like 2 minutes to set this up, so it's kind of
So this guy Kagan like shows up and is kind of like I don't know whatever. Like he introduces like he kind of inserts himself into the group, but then he sets up this little encounter with her where he can go to her house. He steals her wallet so he can show up and say, "Hey, I found your missing wallet." But that scene when he comes to the door, like that's like the best scene in the movie to me is like where that's the best non-action scene, I should say, I guess,
yeah,
because that's what we're here for.
right.
But he shows up and's like, "Hey, I found your wallet," and like he comes off pretty charming and like just like a nice decent guy. And then he's trying to insert himself into the way to get in the house, and it just slowly takes that turn where she gets a vibe and she knows like there's something up with this dude,
Yep.
and unfortunately she doesn't call Jeff Speakman right away and get him over there.
Which is really weird because Speakman lives with her anyway, so it gave like early on it gave really heavy like Silence of the Lamb vibes, and we should mention it up top because you and I have already talked about the score is like ridiculously over the top and hilarious. It tries to go really hard and it doesn't land.
And then there's spots where it also goes really like I don't know, like glib, or not glib isn't the right word, but like it gets kind of light and like
Yeah,
playful.
it does. It feels like
Like,
they
why
really
are we doing
wanted to
that?
be Jonathan Demme and Howard Shore, and just like couldn't
Right.
pull either one. So they're like, who can do a really quick job on the cheap of approximating Howard Shore's scoring ability? And some guy was like, I can.
And that guy was fucking wrong.
He was. But that said,
This guy was not Howard Shore.
right? But that said, the instant that Speakman is on screen, he just has, like you said, this intangible thing that makes him a movie star, that he's immediately better than Seagal and Van Damme out of the gate. I'd argue he's better than Dolph. I mean,
Oh
Dolph
yeah.
gets there, but not like this is what Speakman's third movie. Dolph had to do way more movies before he felt like he was a leading man that could hold his own. Like the only other person that at three movies you're like, this dude's a fucking movie star is Brandon Lee. Like Speakman and Brandon
Hmm.
Lee feel like they both got robbed. Obviously Brandon because he's no longer with us. But Speakman, you're like, what the fuck happened? Because this dude, he's like legitimately a good actor. The camera loves him, and just the way that he carries himself, you're like, I love this dude. He's awesome.
Yeah, I mean Van Damme, I think got there, maybe even surpassed in abilities. What Speakman's
Yeah,
able to do, but it took him a long time to get there. It didn't even happen during the heyday of his time as a at the top of the box office as the guy. It
right.
didn't happen until like the early 2000s maybe, or something like that he was
Yeah,
this good. And but yeah, Jeff Speakman got totally robbed, and it's like he came in this weird, like, I don't know, like The Perfect Weapon came out in what, 91, 92,
somewhere in there. This kind of tail end
and
movement.
it was like, yeah, the tail end of, like, I mean, Van Damme and Seagal kind of shored up their positions as the guys, and even that only
Yeah.
lasted for a couple more years.
Well, Van Damme
And
played a big sci-fi, and
he never got the really good, like, direct to video parts that he should have, because there were always a couple guys that were like on TV or whatever, or Jeff Wincott was up there or whoever that kind of just got those parts, and he just never quite had it. And it's unfortunate because he, like you said, he shows up and he just has this charisma, the scream. Even for this movie that, like you said, basically sidelines him, he doesn't really have a lot to do in this movie. It's just like he's standing around glowering the entire time until it's time for the climax, basically.
yeah, it's definitely uneven because we spent a ton of time with the guy who kills his sister and in the prison and all that stuff, and effectively like Speakman's not kicking the shit out of anybody, but he's also not on screen long enough to like really act his way through a lot of scenes. But then when he
Mm-hmm.
does, like, he's great at the beginning where we get to see him, training a group of cops and how to handle, live situations with a shooter and that sort of thing. He's great in that. He's great when he hooks up with that like expose reporter that covers crime and stuff. And he's like really charming throughout all that, and he's super smooth. Um, but then he's also great in the scene where he like single handedly takes out a killer's hick family that shows up like armed to the teeth, and Speakman doesn't even break a fucking sweat, wasting them all
It's
single
amazing.
handedly.
It's definitely the best scene in the entire movie. Like,
Yeah,
definitely the best action sequence in the entire movie. He just, because if you've only seen him in The Perfect Weapon, he doesn't use it. The tagline for the movie literally is "No gun, no knife, no equal." In this, he's using some guns here and there,
yep,
and so it is a different side of him. But it's really like the guns are kind of superfluous almost. I
yep,
mean, he uses them, but he doesn't necessarily need them.
yeah. And that's a shame that that scene is in the first 40 minutes. So it's about the halfway mark, and it eclipses the climax of the movie and the last action sequence. You're like, well, shit, we already saw the best scene in the flick, and then the alley scene behind the bar is pretty fucking cool too.
Yeah, second best. Yeah,
But then his
yeah. He has a cool
big
moment
bad
where
of like,
yeah, he has a cool moment where he like he's taken out everybody else. There's one guy that's kind of still barely hanging on, and he just nails this guy and keeps walking. And like, it's one of those cool, just not even breaking his stride moments
Right.
that you enjoy. That you're just like, this is what I'm here for.
And that's the closest we get to seeing the incredibly fast Jeff Speakman. Like the fact that it doesn't um, capitalize on his speed and agility in the action scenes. Sometimes you're like, this
Mm-hmm.
it leaves you wanting. I mean, that said,
Yeah, it really does.
he's still really great. And then James Brolin is super awesome as this conservative, old school values, warden that seemingly loves to throw a party anytime somebody gets freaking put to death in the chair. Like he's so great at that.
He's having a lot of fun in this. You can tell it's just like he knows nobody's gonna see this. He's just gonna go for it.
Like he tells that one guy, he's like, that dad that you killed in that convenience store, his son's not going to have a Christmas this year, but you're going to have a Christmas. We're going to light you up like a fucking Christmas tree.
He's having a lot of fun in this.
It's really cool to see James Brolin just go all in with something like that. It's great.
Yeah, and I'm Elizabeth Grayson. I mentioned already, but like she. So does it feel like her and Speakman are like together instantly, like right away? Like she's just like
Dude, yeah. I mean, from like moment one. Where she's like, I'd
like
like
she's
to take
into
you
it.
out to learn more about this. And he's like, how about I take you to dinner and we don't? And she's like, sure.
I understand both ways.
I mean, yeah, definitely.
I get it from both sides, but that didn't sound right. Um,
Sorry.
but but yeah, but it feels like she is living with him like right away, basically.
Pretty much. And I get it because he doesn't want to go back to the house where he lived with his sister because it's a crime scene. So I get it.
That's fair. Yeah. I forget. I didn't think of that,
He'd never be
but
able to grate
it's like,
cookies without thinking about his sister scraping off half of
mhm.
um, what's it, Martin Keegan's face.
All right, yeah, and so I don't know the climax. Even I don't know if you want to broach the climax, but like it's very underwhelming for the whole movie's building towards it, and then it just doesn't add up to anything.
It's really crazy because it's almost like this insane The Rock deal where he has to break into the prison. And that's where we get Jim Varney coming in because he gives Jeff all of this shit that he's going to take and like down to like single scope uh, night vision goggles and all this kind of stuff. And then it's like he works his way in, and then like the fight itself isn't very cool or memorable at all.
Yeah, I mean, he fights a couple guys like in one of the cell blocks, and that's the best we get for that. And the entire prison break is that one single fight, and the fight with the main bad guy is nothing to write home about. And it's almost like I think you know the Perfect Weapon had Speakman and Jeff Amata and a whole bunch of guys like really figuring out some choreography, and they just didn't have that time or
Yeah,
talent on this one to really make that happen. And so it was just like, which you're doing a direct to video action movie. That's the number one thing you need to focus on is that.
right. Also, were there only
And
6 inmates in the prison?
yeah, apparently somewhere in that number.
There were not.
And I mean, so we get this really underwhelming climax to this movie that just, like I said, over promises and under delivers. I feel like the first 15 minutes of the movie need to be this setup, and then the whole rest of the movie needs to be him fighting his way through the prison to get to the bad guy. That would be the movie if I'm making the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's pretty uneven as far as it goes. That it definitely needed Cohen to do at least one more pass, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
the booger sugar when he did the pass. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Good luck
there's,
with that.
there's not a lot there for 92 minutes. But, it's a fun little deal of taking the dive into Speakman's career. We only have these handful of, you know, video evidence that Speakman was in Hollywood and did this stuff. And The Perfect Weapon is, while it's not a masterpiece, it's still a stone cold classic of martial arts cinema.
Mhm.
This is not
Oh yeah.
even like, please don't rent it. Like, watch it on Tubi or wait until you can get it for free or from a friend. Because
Yeah, don't pay money for this.
I don't want the hate mail of somebody being like, I wasted $2.99 on this damn movie. I'm like, I told you.
Definitely don't pay any amount of money for this.
But it's still worth covering because Speakman is still a badass in some points. The guy who plays Keegan is a really good bad guy. He's just not given a lot to do. And then just getting to see the only person in the movie that's unhinged is Brolin, and that's fantastic. And if you've never seen Jim Varney do anything other than Ernest, like we haven't, I mean, I can't remember a time that I saw Jim outside of like maybe the Beverly Hillbillies play a character that was different. And that's not super out of the ballpark of Ernest being in the Beverly Hillbillies, you know? So it was really cool to see Varney be a hard ass, like slimy mercenary guy. It's just very against type. And you're like, I bet he had a blast doing that.
Oh yeah, it definitely. I mean, if only for the small amount of time that he's in the movie, but like he definitely seems like he's enjoying himself with just getting to do something that's kind of out of his normal thing, and especially at that point, I mean, that's all he was known for was Ernest, pretty much.
Yeah. But we wouldn't be doing our jobs with a show called The History of Violence if we didn't cover the ups, the downs, and the direct to video misses.
Absolutely, and I thought of while we've been doing the show, I thought of the movie, like a good example of a movie that, that makes all the other sometimes slop you have to work through to get to a good direct to video action movie. I finally thought of one. Dolph Lundgren's Army of One
There you go.
is one of those movies that makes it all worth it. That's like a legitimately, I would say, a legitimately great movie.
So there you go. We'll get to Army of One. Just like I know we'll get to, what is it, Dark Angel at some point.
Dark Angel, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's all kinds of those we'll get to that are, they might have come out direct to video, but they still are worthy of consideration.
Absolutely. And I love Dolph. I'm a Masters of the Universe and Punisher apologist through and through.
I feel you on that. I think that is why we're doing this show, is because
Right.
we're on that same wavelength.
I'll go to bat
And
for,
I'll go to the mat for Army of One any day.
but that said, if I find the expert on VHS for like 50 cents, I'll probably buy it just to have it.
That Yeah, that's the only amount of money I would pay for for this movie, is maybe if I found a VHS for less than $1.
Right? Just to be like, what's his name in high fidelity to show that you have it, and somebody be like, well, can I watch it? And you're like, no, you can't.
No,
How
no,
much for it? And I'm like, it's too
it's not for sale.
much.
Right. Never going to be on sale.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah, this movie, I mean, it's just, I guess the thing to say about it is that this came out in 1995, and in a lot of ways, it's pretty emblematic of a lot of 1995 direct to video action movies. It promises a lot, it doesn't deliver very much, and there might be one or two good action sequences, and that's about all you can expect from it. But Jeff Speakman, nonetheless, deserves his due, because
yeah.
he should have had a bigger career. He should have been in the same league as Seagal and Van Damme, and I mean, can you imagine like I'm trying to think of a, say Under Siege 2 didn't have Seagal in it and they needed a new guy, like
Speakman could have done that.
I'm
Sure.
Speakman, Under Siege 2, I'm all about it.
Yeah. And, that makes me think we don't do the full categories on the video shorts and stuff, but I do have a bold action statement, a two-parter for this
All right.
particular movie, because I feel like I'm very passionate about what I'm going to say. In that, one, I know that Stallone has killed the Expendables. It's not going to happen anymore, but somebody needs to do a new version of something like the Expendables and get Speakman to come back to do a small part and to kick ass. But that's only part A of my bold action
Okay.
statement, is that Speakman
I like where
kick
you're going with
back
this, though.
at some point, even if it's little.
Yeah.
And then the second point is that we are constantly today in Hollywood seeing franchises get rebooted, reimagined. We're seeing 40-year-old, new entries that either negate all the sequels or kind of go back to what works for the original and just rehash stuff. And it's the same old, same old. But they're taking movies that work. Like The Karate Kid didn't need a remake in the 2010s because The Karate Kid as it exists is a really great movie in 1980,
Mm-hmm.
right? But The Expert is ripe for a remaking. Please write a better version of The Expert. The basic plot is great. The fact that you have an ex special forces trainer whose sister gets attacked and murdered in their house, and he sees the killer leaving and is instrumental in locking the killer up, and then he gets off on some bullshit deal about being, mentally ill or something like that, when he obviously, from what the movie shows us, is just a cold killer. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
could take that premise, you could get someone like, oh, I don't know, you could get Statham, you could get Chris Hemsworth, you could get Liam Hemsworth, anybody that's around for action today, remake this movie, get a decent plot, a way better fucking score. And this is something
Mm-hmm.
that you could really turn into a good movie. There's a good movie hiding in here, and Speakman was robbed of it.
Yeah, very
But that's
very
my old
much
action
so.
statement. Like, Hollywood, quit fucking around. Quit messing with stuff that
Ryan
works.
Gosling.
Yeah,
I could see Ryan Gosling in a version of this.
totally. Get somebody to come in and kill a remake of this. We have great writers. We have really good action directors. You and I have talked about Joe Lynch that did Everly and Mayhem, and he's done a few like legit action deals that he does really
Mm-hmm.
great with. You could get somebody like that to kill directing this movie. It won't cost a lot of money. It's still a direct to streaming movie. I don't think this is theatrical. You put it on Netflix, you put it on Hulu, you put it on Paramount, whatever it is. But you get somebody to really do it well and do it justice. And you could even have Speakman switch, and he's not going to be the main guy, but you could have him be the warden or some other character in this, or like bring him back in some way to tie it. I think that works today.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, get like you said, give Speakman his due for sure before he, I mean, he's not old, but he's
No,
66, so he's not like ancient, but he definitely hasn't. The last movie he made was like in 2006, I think, and so it'd be nice to see him just have at least one last kind of thing. And I think part of the thing too, with Speakman and that Seagal and Van Damme, they wanted to be movie stars, and that's what I mean. The martial arts, I wouldn't say for them was a means to an end, but it was a means to getting to the part that they wanted, which was being a star. And I think Jeff Speakman was always more committed to being a martial artist, and I mean he committed himself to that, and so the movie thing kind of came second, even if he was as talented as he kind of ended up being at it.
yeah,
He was more committed to perfecting his craft, and so he didn't quite probably maybe pursue the parts that he could have that really would have made him on the level of those guys. And plus his big studio debut didn't quite hit as much as it should have, so that doesn't help anything.
yeah. I think they could get him to come back in some capacity. He doesn't have to be the action leading man, but you could have him, be the elder statesman. Even if you put
Mm-hmm.
something akin to the perfect weapon today, he's the, you know, uh, guy that he took from in the original movie. He's the master that understands the dragon and the tiger already. He's not out there doing all the kicks and everything. But I think Hollywood really needs to realize that remaking stuff that worked just because it's a proven IP is kind of wasting time. Like, you're going to get a built-in audience, but go back and take some of the stuff that didn't work, and you've got a basic premise. A writer doesn't have to start from scratch. Say, here are your parameters. We want to do the same story. Just make it better.
And I'm always more excited to see that is like the thing that didn't work that we can go back and I mean we'll have a way bigger budget, and just even with the technology now as far as cutting the cost down for certain things, like I mean they had to film this on film versus
Yeah.
doing it digitally, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it does cut the cost down. They can go a lot further with, for less money with this. So it doesn't have to be a crazy expensive movie or anything.
No, doesn't have to break down any crazy doors, but I think it could be a performer for a streaming platform. You know,
And you mentioned the Expendables. I have always felt this way, at least since they announced the Expendables, and they never quite. I mean, even though I like, well, the first two, I guess. Um, but I always felt like they were leaving money on the table by not doing an alternate series with like a direct, and it would have to be a direct to streaming thing, which I don't think the economics of were quite maybe there at the time. But if they'd done a direct to video Expendables series and gotten guys like Speakman and Michael Dudikoff and Jeff Wincott and Lorenzo Lamas, people like that,
yeah,
Cynthia Rothrock, and done and Olivier Grunier, if
sure,
you'd gotten people like that that had been the kind of, while we had our Stallones and Schwarzeneggers and Van Dams and Seagulls up here on the Mount Rushmore thing and Chuck Norris and whoever, we have down here this whole other bottom part of the industry that these guys are keeping afloat in the action genre that kind of can get a little bit of their due out of this, and it doesn't have to be, obviously it would be a lower budget than the Expendables, and a little bit more, the B version, but just to let those guys get a little bit of the spotlight one more time, because they held up a significant part of the Hollywood economy there in the early to mid 90s.
yeah. It's another lesson Hollywood could take from someone like Iceberg Slim, the famous pimp that put out a bunch of books. That like his deal was, you always work the totality of your stable, right? Like you don't just work
Right.
Stallones and Schwarzeneggers. You also give stuff to your Speakmans. Expendables could have done that. You could even had them be spin-off missions with somebody like Christmas running them instead of Barney, right? Like maybe Stallone's not
Mm-hmm.
all of them, but you could get Statham to show up. But it just goes to show that there is a lot of promise in this movie. I think that's probably, while we said it's not a great movie, don't spend money on it. If you do seek it out, there's stuff to dig about it. There are things that are promising. There are some really great moments, and some good
For
action
sure.
moments. It's just uneven at the end of the day. So, but it was cool to watch. This format of doing the shorts allows us to talk about movies that I probably wouldn't watch otherwise. I wasn't going to talk about The Expert for an hour.
And that's the thing with a lot of these movies that I think is the thing, especially the because a lot of the direct to streaming movies now, they're very, I don't know, I don't want to say formulaic isn't the right word, more, and I don't feel like people try a lot necessarily in some of them.
Yeah,
And the thing with these was like, I think because of the economics of it and because they still had to do it on film, they, even if the results turn out to be like the Expert where it's not that good, they still had to kind of give it a shot to make a legitimate movie that you were gonna maybe rent at the video store and sight unseen and
yeah,
have some hope for.
for sure. I mean, they put enough of that in there. They got some of those people like a James Brolin, a Jeff Speakman to show up and do stuff, but just didn't quite go the distance.
Yeah, just yeah, we tried, but it just didn't quite land the plane on that one.
So, but that's The Expert. If you have Tubi, which by now, if you listen to the show at all, if there's a takeaway, it's that Tubi's probably one of the greatest streamers out there. It doesn't cost you a thing, and they have amazing stuff all the time.
I mean, it's
It's
so fucking deep, like the catalog that
like,
they have, that you find the most random thing. We were talking about what was the movie we were talking about last month? Um, it was, I can't remember. It was a horror movie. It was very obscure, like October Blood or something like that, or
oh yeah, yeah, Rocktober Blood. That was it. Yep.
like just okay, we found it on Tubi, like this
Yeah, which came from us
random,
seeing a trailer and not knowing if it was a real movie, but hoping it was, and it turned out it was.
and it's pretty fantastic.
It's pretty awesome. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great platform to use because like this movie is pretty much lost to. time. Nobody's going out there and finding this. I feel like your guys like Quentin Tarantino probably have a copy of it because they bought all of Video Archives back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, who else is going to have a copy of that and let you watch it? Because Quentin's not going to let you take his VHS copy of The Expert. That's not happening.
Right. Yeah, and probably 99% of the stock of these have been pulped or something. Just, oh, we're doing a video store liquidation and gone, and like it's sad.
It really is. But I mean, I don't. I'm going to try to pull it up and see if it's on anything else. But I'd be surprised if you can even pay to rent this. I mean, looking at it, you can buy a disc off Amazon or you can watch it on Tubi. And when I pull
That's
up Amazon, it's a $15 VHS or a $99 DVD. Nobody's paying that for this.
oh wow.
I'm
No,
not paying that for this movie.
no, you should. Nobody should pay, like you said, more than $1 for this movie,
Yeah,
if that. But a good time nonetheless.
that's right. So wrapping it up, get on Tubi, watch The Expert, or find you another deep cut that strikes your fancy.
And there's all kinds of them.
Yep, there is. Their subgenres are bar none. Like the fact that I can sort by action comedy, martial arts action, action horror, action thriller. It's great.
So yeah, definitely check out. I think that's the big takeaway from this week is Tubi and Jeff Speakman rules still.
That's right. Take a risk on Speakman and Tubi.
Absolutely. Until next time, take care, everybody.
Have a good one.
We'll be back with another one. Like and subscribe, and hit our podcast feed. Hit us up on Instagram, The History of Violence, and chat us up on the socials.
Yep, hit us up. Let us know what you think.